Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, it's Christine Collins, and today we are going to talk about some very practical applications for anxiety, specifically and stress, using the vagus nerve, doing things that are easy and free that also work relatively quickly when you are feeling a high level of anxiety. And as always, I like to say that everyone is different and unique, and not every tool or technique works exactly the same for every person. So trial and error, trying out different things, and customizing things that work the best for you is always important. And while there's no guarantee that specific techniques will have perfect outcomes, each of these is rather harmless and fairly easy and doesn't require any special skill. So in case you're not familiar with it, the vagus nerve, VAGUS, is the longest cranial nerve in the body, starting in the brainstem, winding down through the neck, all the way down to the abdomen. And during that journey, it crosses the heart, the lungs, the gut, touches nearly every major organ. And most of it operates underneath our conscious awareness. The interesting thing is that a lot of the signals are going from body to brain and not the other way around, because this nerve gives information back to your brain from the body about what's happening inside of you. And that information can actively shape your emotional state, your nervous system, how you're feeling, and which regions in the brain become activated as a result. So our sympathetic nervous system, that's our fight or flight activation, heart rate goes up, breathing goes up, blood begins to flow more to the muscles, we get stress hormones flooding our system. That is our activation in response to something that feels threatening or anxiety provoking. And then the parasympathetic nervous system slows everything down, rest and digest, heart rate slows, breathing deepens, muscles soften. The vagus nerve is closely aligned to that parasympathetic nervous system. So shifting out of a state of anxiety or stress and back into a state of calm is partially connected to how this particular nerve does its job. So a handful of fairly quick and easy tools. The first one is an extended exhale. And while many of us have heard this over and over, perhaps over time, there are specific reasons why this is important and works. When the exhale is longer than the inhale, it stimulates that parasympathetic nervous system activity. And it's more to do with the ratio, the length of inhale to exhale. So there are different numbers that people will recommend. Inhale for 4, exhale for 6 or 8. And I think that it really is dependent on the person. I know for myself, when I'm in a state of higher anxiety, I have to start out with smaller numbers and work my way up to a longer exhale. But it does have a fairly immediate impact on things like heart rate and anxiety. Not everyone enjoys this activity, so there are others, but it is worth noting that biologically it can be very effective. I do understand for some people, and sometimes even true for myself, that focusing on breathing is not helpful, not optimal, and I did a podcast about this, a different one. So if that isn't working for you, there are other tools that might work. Another one that is influential on the vagus nerve is cold water, particularly splashing cold water on your face. We have a mammalian dive reflex, so that when cold water contacts the face, it stimulates a nerve in the face, the trigeminal nerve, which then activates the vagus nerve. And the result is a drop in heart rate, slowing down the heart rate. And this can work fairly quickly. Of course, it has a survival purpose in terms of conserving oxygen and slowing the heart in the event that the person is underwater. But we're borrowing that reflex to help with an anxiety response. Cold water on your face or on your wrists for maybe 30 seconds or so, and your nervous system can begin to show response before your mind and your brain and your thoughts have even begun to catch up to it. The next one is one that I've had some personal experience with, and I actually did another whole podcast on this topic around vocal vibration. So if you're interested in that, you can go and find that one on humming and singing. But the vagus nerve runs through the larynx and the pharynx. So when you produce sustained vocal sound, humming, chanting, singing, and audible sighing, And even things like gargling out loud. You are creating a mechanical vibration alongside the nerve. And of course, there are many chanting traditions, singing traditions across various cultures going back thousands of years that produce such consistent calming effects that actually are very physiologically grounded before there was even the science behind it to understand how it's so effective. For example, in yoga practices, Om chanting, along with various other types of chanting, can kind of deactivate the anxiety centers of our brain, the limbic brain, that are involved in emotional arousal, stress response, and upset. And it's very attuned to vagus nerve stimulation. And even just a few minutes of chanting audibly can produce some very immediate, noticeable effects in terms of parasympathetic activity, lowering that anxiety response, that activation. There's also a simple sustained hum. So not everyone perhaps feels comfortable chanting or singing. You can simply hum out loud. Doesn't require any particular skill, or you don't have to be good at singing or anything like that. There's no pitch that's required, just a low, deep hum that's sustained for several minutes. Helps to activate the vagus nerve and contribute to that vagal tone over time. And there are various forms of this in yogic practices and various other traditions. One is known as humming bee breath, sustained sound, deliberate elongated hum. There's also lion's breath, a deep inhale through the nose and then a forceful exhale through an open mouth with the tongue extended, and then a loud sound. And that does multiple vagal mechanisms at once. You have the extended exhale, so you're getting the breathing, the longer exhale engagement. You're getting the throat engagement, the release of tension that may be held in the jaw and in the face. And a lot of people chronically store stress in their jaw, clenching their jaw. So it releases those muscles. And then you're also getting the benefit of the audible sigh or the audible exhale. And then I had mentioned gargling, so that's another one where you are making an audible noise in your throat and it's activating that vagal mechanism. And then the last one is known as ujjayi breath, sometimes called ocean breath, a yogic breathing technique where you gently constrict the muscles at the back of the throat and breathe in and out through the nose. The constriction in the back of the throat creates an audible sound that may be described like an ocean wave, a steady whoosh of air moving through that narrowed passage. And the laryngeal constriction directly stimulates the vagus nerve where it passes through the throat. So all of these together further activate the parasympathetic system that slows everything down, naturally slowing down the breath, lowering the heart rate. And personally, I have used this type of breathing for various different scenarios where I was experiencing high level of stress during painful medical situation, but I have personally found it to be incredibly powerful and beneficial. And as I mentioned already, each of us is different, so we all respond to different techniques and tools in different ways. But I think that it's important to have some tools that are free, easy to use, available at all times, where you don't need to have something specific with you. You don't have to buy specific tools. And I do recommend, if you are interested in some of these that are more specific to yoga practices, certainly is always beneficial to go to a yoga class or work with a yoga practitioner. But I wanted to mention these things because a lot of times it feels like we don't have control when there's a high level of anxiety and stress. And there are some techniques that we have immediately at our disposal that we can use that work relatively quickly and can do a lot with in the moment calming our nervous system. It's always beneficial to be supported, to learn how to do things, in the proper way. But many of these are relatively easy to do at any time. And as you practice various different tools and techniques over time, they become easier for you to use in the moment. It becomes almost second nature to pull up that tool and use it in the moment when you need it. And of course, there are many other tools and techniques available available to manage stress and anxiety. I offer several of those in my mindset membership, the Hypno-Pothecary, also known as the Poth. Things like Yoga Nidra, an incredibly powerful tool for slowing down the nervous system, for creating a deep sense of relaxation, purpose, and soothing the nervous system, as well as tools like hypnosis, which are very powerful both in the moment for reducing stress and anxiety, as well as over time. As we begin to change our thought patterns and the nature of our anxious thoughts and our stress responses, we slowly learn how to think differently, and our thoughts have an enormous impact on our body and on our stress response. So both of those together are incredibly powerful. And for those moments when time is tight, there are also many short mini meditations of around 5 to 6 minutes. It's a wonderful way to start your day off, to get into the right vibe, the right mindset, to go into your day a little bit more optimistic, feeling a little bit more empowered, a little bit more in control by taking those first 5 minutes of your morning before you open your phone and start checking emails and text messages and all of the things that often can cause stress. Setting that tone for yourself, making that time for yourself before you go around giving it away to everybody else. So I hope you found this to be helpful, and until we connect the next time, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at RavenMosaic.com.